Ben, man, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Last time we conversed, we were discussing biohacking, neural hacking, and things like that. You put me on to mud water, which I have here with me today, a fresh cup. I was hoping you would have yours too, but I blame myself. I should have given you a heads up so you didn't have to chug yours before our recording. I hope you don't have to use the restroom while we're recording here. But yeah, but I'm just looking forward to this. And our conversation today is going to be centered around fundraising and emerging markets, specifically your niche, which is the cannabis, psychedelics, and things along those lines. But I don't want to introduce you. I think it's always best for our guests to introduce themselves because you're going to do a far better job than I could ever do. So I guess we'll start there. Who is Ben York? If you don't mind just introducing yourself, giving us a quick synopsis and what got you to the place you're at today.
Yeah. So first off, thank you for having me. Really cool to be included here and excited to chat with you. So as a quick background, my current role is Director of Corporate Strategy for a firm called RampRate. We are a growth strategy advisory company. So kind of like an accelerator, we work with startups, but for much longer periods than a normal accelerator would, and slightly different structures to how we work with those clients as well. As you mentioned, my domain is within the health and wellness sector, cannabis, psychedelics, natural wellness, more broadly speaking. But I also work with a lot of our other Web3 clients as well, mostly with a capital raise strategy focus and due diligence as well. So we help companies get investable, provide a lot of other services as well, marketing assistance, operational consulting, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's a fun time. I to give a little more background, out of college, I worked for Citigroup in finance in Chicago, thought that that's what I was going to do for the rest of my career, and pretty quickly realized that I had to figure something else out. It wasn't cutting it for me. I liked markets. I liked, staying abreast of what's going on in the news all the time, but moving treasuries around for, hedge funds for a few basis points here or there wasn't really cutting it. And I realized I liked working with entrepreneurs and I wanted to get on the investing side of things. And so, after a few one, moved out to San Francisco from Chicago, joined a startup in the healthcare space for about a year, get some operating experience there. And then went through a group called VU Venture Partners, which is kind of like an accelerator to get into venture capital. And from there, I joined the ArcView Group, which is the oldest and largest investor network specifically for cannabis and their venture fund as well. So I spent a couple of years there as the deal flow and due diligence manager. So saw 1,000 pitches a year, worked with entrepreneurs, helping them craft their pitch and pitch deck. Also worked with the venture fund and led their due diligence process too. And then it was late 2020 when I connected with RampRate. They needed some help with some portfolio valuation stuff, and that was my specialty, my background, and it was a great fit. And so that's where I am today. Yeah.
Hey, bro. So I know white don't crack, but you look like you're about 18 years old, and you've and you've accomplished all this thing. How old are you right now, Ben?
I appreciate that. I'm 29, so close, but
okay. Like I said, white don't crack, so that would make a lot of sense. Now, I was stalking you a little bit. I mean, that's the nature of what I do, and I'm like, I'm so happy this dude is in the space that he's in. The cannabis and psychedelics, because, dude, you must be in a very depressed state right now. You're an Arsenal fan? I'm like, come on. To be an Arsenal fan, you must be in a deep state of depression. Oh, come on, stop that. Look, you have to be in a very deep state of depression right now, and it makes sense why you're in the space that you're in. To be an Arsenal fan, losing just comes with that, with the nature of the beast. So now, another thing that I noticed, Ben, you have your series 57, 63, and 7, right? And so at such a young age, I know that those licenses help with your career to some degree, I'm sure. Now, if you don't mind briefing us on what is the significance of those licenses and how has it been pivotal to where you are right now?
Yeah, and so just a quick point of clarification. I probably should update my LinkedIn because I think that those licenses have lapsed at this point, but I did hold them at one point, especially earlier in my career. And if anyone's looking on the broker check website, like I'm not pretending that like I still hold those licenses, but so the 763, 57, I mean, that was primarily for when I was working at Citigroup in sales and trading. So, handling securities on behalf of institutional clients. And then the 57, it was actually focused on trading, and I was on the equity derivatives team there. So, I would say that it's less relevant to my day-to-day function now, kind of, but it was a really good foundation early in my career to get a crash course in everything securities and financial markets. And, as I was getting into the venture world, I was like, oh, is this stuff really relevant? Does it still matter? And it absolutely does, because, you talk about, I guess when I was there, I was thinking about things from a very public markets perspective, but all that stuff still holds true for private markets too. And there's still the securities laws still are applicable in private markets too. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily have that background to know how to navigate those regulatory filings and things like that. So, we have broker dealer relationships at RampRate. I considered, reinstating my licenses. But, I made a deliberate decision a long time ago to move away from that broker dealer field. I didn't want to be a salesman, and, whether or not that's something that comes naturally to me, like it's not how I wanted to make my money. So, I made a deliberate shift years ago to kind of move away from that, but it was a great foundation, and I think definitely helped, give me a good leg up in where I wanted to go later on.
Okay. That's good to know. Love the clarification there, because those are questions that come about here and there. So thank you for that. Now, again, to reiterate, the purpose of this conversation, we're going to be covering fundraising and emerging markets. Now, I'm sure there are many out there that do not know what is an emerging market. So let's start with some definitions. What is the definition of an emerging market? What are some qualifications of such?
It's a good question. I mean, so often emerging markets are thought of from a geographic perspective, and I was actually reading something earlier today about the BRIC countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And in a lot of ways, those have been considered traditional emerging markets. But I think about it as well from new investment categories and industries that we're seeing pop up in the US and outside of it as well. Cannabis and psychedelics being those two, right? These are industries that for a long time have been in black markets and have slowly shifted into legal businesses. Now, cannabis is still not legally recognized at the federal level, but in a lot of ways, it's still operating as a normal industry would. Now, I can talk for hours about the intricacies of like the tax law and stuff and how that's hampering this industry that's seen significant job growth and has been a major contributor to our economic development, even through the pandemic when it was labeled an essential business. Psychedelics doesn't have that quite the same hurdles to face, because most of those companies are going through FDA trials, so they're already not approved, but given runway to go through that pathway in a federally legal sense. So, it's not like they're selling psychedelics in a storefront. They're going through pharmaceutical pathways and making them legally approved medicines.
Okay. Now, how what can we expect right now? So for those who are in your space and they have a startup and looking to raise capital, how impacted is your niche currently with all that's going on in the markets?
It's pretty tough out there. Not going to lie. You know, when I was at ArcView in 2020, and the pandemic was first, settling in, there was a resource that I would turn to for capital raise statistics week over week. And it was something like 75, there was a 75% decrease in capital raised in 2020.
What resource is that, by the way?
It is the Viridian Capital Advisors. They have a cannabis deal tracker. I don't know if they still have it. I haven't checked it in a while, but that used to be a go-to resource for me, where they would they'd highlight all of the capital raises and M&A activity, both from a public and private markets point of view, and debt and equity raises.
Okay.
So I ran the numbers, and I don't have the statistic off the top of my head, but it's something like 75% lower activity for private companies in 2020 versus 2019, and that hasn't really recovered. It's been really difficult for cannabis startups to raise money, and so for reference, I'm a mentor for the Ease Momentum Accelerator program, where the delivery company Ease works with social equity startups in the cannabis industry, provides them with a grant, provides them with a lot of resources, demo day, all that kind of stuff, and pairs them with mentors to help answer questions, work on their pitch deck, all that kind of stuff, which is where I come in. But it's really tough. It's really tough to raise money, and a lot of those companies are facing that head on. I was at an industry conference back in April, the Trailblazers conference in Sedona, and the mood was pretty low from a fundraising perspective. The one bright spot is that we've seen other biotech pharmaceutical markets have these kind of low periods, and really it can't get much worse than this, right? Like a lot of the public companies are trading at very low multiples, almost at cash. They can't really trade any lower, and they're generating a lot of returns. So we can kind of hope that there might be a pop in the public markets, which might trickle down to the private markets pretty soon too. But without a change in the legal status and some of the banking regulations as low-hanging fruit, we may not see a catalyst in the near term to provide that pop that we're hoping for. And on the psychedelic side, it's not much better. Part of the problem is, as I mentioned, a lot of these companies are going through FDA clinical trials, and so that drug discovery process and the clinical trial process itself is very lengthy and expensive. And a lot of companies went public early on with really high, big promises, and they haven't yet been able to deliver and have been burning through cash, and that has put a real damper on the private markets too. I know a lot of really great companies that are struggling to find good investors and any investors really to back their vision, and it's tough.
All right, so you're on both sides of the spectrum. You're an advisor, you're an investor, you're getting it done on both sides, right? Now, what are some KPIs you would say that investors are more keen into looking at right now in order to make an investment? Like, what exactly are investors really looking for to say this right here investment is what we're looking to put capital towards? Because I know somebody's getting money somewhere, right?
Yeah. There are a select few, and those companies have done well and have, I think, been successful in telling a story that resonates with investors. I think it's really not different from what you're hearing in a lot of the other tech markets. Is that revenue growth and cutting expenses and a path to profitability. It depends on the business, obviously, too, but that high growth story isn't resonating as well as it used to because of the broader macro conditions. I think what's good is that, as I mentioned, cannabis businesses especially are in a good position to take advantage of that. They're still generating significant revenues. Most of them. There's plenty of challenges in the market still, and again, we could talk about that specifically for hours, but showing revenue growth, cutting expenses, watching that bottom line, being capital conscious, I think is critical at this stage to show investors that management teams have what it takes to make it through this downturn, this dry period. On the psychedelic side, it's a little bit harder to say because, again, outside of clear traction and achieving milestones in the clinical trial pathway, there's very little that they can show in terms of KPIs to show that progress outside of those big major milestones. You can't, it's hard to generate revenue. Like, how do you generate revenue if you're going through clinical trials and don't have an approved pharmaceutical yet? You really can't. And so we're, at RampRate and elsewhere, we're looking at companies on the tech side of things, digital therapeutics, the picks and shovels, if you will, of the industry, maybe less emphasis on the drug discovery and clinical trial pathway, because those are more traditional business models that have a lot of the same KPIs that you can expect to see from other tech industries. I should say as well, that's kind of our strategy within Ensemble Brands. So I'm an advisor for a small venture fund called Ensemble Brands in the cannabis industry. And we've been focused on tech and software for a lot of those reasons. Those businesses are able to cross borders much easier, right? Like, most cannabis companies are siloed state by state, having to jump through licensing requirements to expand across the country. But tech businesses aren't restricted by those same regulations. So it's a lot easier to, still not easy, but it's a lot more straightforward to expand the business on the tech side of things.
So now you're saying on the tech side of things, clearly folks are not smoking digital marijuana. What sort of tech? What sort? I need to stop. No,
Maybe
but what sort of tech are we looking at? What are some new technological advancements? Is it more so in the process of helping the marijuana itself grow? Is it in making like what role does this tech play in the ecosystem?
It's pretty varied. For example, one company I'm an advisor for is called Genetica, and they have a product called Flora, which is a product recommendation platform for dispensaries. So there's a big problem in cannabis where it's an education problem, really. Consumers, for the most part, don't really know how to differentiate one product from another. They don't really know how to navigate a dispensary and find what they should buy. And in a lot of cases, bud tenders, while they are very knowledgeable and equipped to help customers navigate those issues, I've heard personal stories of friends of mine who have been sold products that were way higher THC content than they expected and had really bad experiences. And it ends up turning them off to an entire product category that could be really beneficial for their health. And so this product, it's an AI and ML based product recommendation engine. So you can say, I need help sleeping, or I need help with my anxiety, whatever it is. The product can scan the inventory based on your demographics, provide you with a product and a few others that's in stock that you should check out. And it's pretty incredible the immediate ROI that these dispensaries are seeing from a platform like this. It helps the customer retention. It helps the customer know what they're buying and feel more confident in those purchases, which in turn increases the average order volume. There's so many knock-on effects to just providing the consumer with a little bit of extra knowledge and confidence in what they're buying. That this company Genetica, I mean, they've got a long wait list for their product because the benefits are immediately there. And retailers really need something to help them stand out, because most customers just, look at two factors. They look at price and THC content, right? And so, this helps them stand out, helps them sell products that they might have a tough time selling otherwise. Retain customers that are traditionally have very low loyalty in this industry.
Awesome. So you're now part of the ScaleupStream family. So thank you for joining us, by the way. And for our startup community, they're looking to approach you for whether it's advice, whether it's to raise capital. I'm sure that's going to be preliminary reason. What are some tools or advice you may have for them, so that they know how to be prepared before even approaching you?
It's a good question. I think, one thing that entrepreneurs should keep in mind is to know the audience, right? I get a lot of inbound on LinkedIn, and most of it just isn't relevant. I understand that, the more shots you take, the higher likelihood that one will hit. But at the same time, if you're not reaching out to someone who has an expertise in that area, or, understands what you're trying to do, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just wasting your time. So I think looking at the portfolio, understanding, there's a way to craft an intro saying like, hey, I noticed you invested in X, Y, and Z, or are involved with this project or whatever, to help try to bridge that gap instead of just jumping into like, hey, we're looking to change the world, blah, blah, blah. It's like, how many of those, do you have to see before you just shut down all inbound leads coming in? So I think that's the number one thing. And, you only get one shot at a first impression. So really thinking about not just that audience, but making it as personal as possible. Showing you've done your research and your homework really makes a difference. It's funny you mentioned the Arsenal thing, because I literally have that up on my LinkedIn to see if people will pick up on that and do their homework and reach out, mentioning something like that. That's like a little test that I have. And if people don't do that, I have a much lower likelihood of responding. It doesn't really matter what they even say, but I'm like, okay, at least this person took the time to look at what I've done and what I care about. So yeah, that's kind of like a little trick that I have to.
I have to keep all Arsenal jokes aside, so I'm trying to be on my best behavior here. No, but Ben, it's such a pleasure having you on. I know we agreed to a time limit for this recording here, and we've reached that. So it's been such a pleasure. Quick question: how are you staying sharp between your ears? What are some tools you're currently using in this during these times to stay informed?
I'm a voracious reader of newsletters. I probably way too many to the point where it's like an information overload at this point, and I need to cut back. But I subscribe to everything Axios, and I know that they just got acquired, but they've made a point to say that their content's not going to change. But they put out really fantastic content in a really easy to digest way. I also just started following this one called New Life. Neolife, Neolife. They cover a lot of emerging markets trends, psychedelics being one of them, but some really, really interesting, like, edge case technologies and really interesting articles. It's less frequent than something like an Axios, but I really like the content that they're putting out too.
Thank you, Ben. I hope you have fun during this conversation here.
Yeah, had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us.